Welcome to the Been There, Done That podcast, where we give our guests the opportunity to talk openly about their career, their ups and downs, and all things in between. You can follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can also watch it on YouTube. If you enjoyed the podcast, give us a like and a follow on our social media, which you can find in the link in the show notes. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 11. I'd like to welcome Barbie Devchand onto the podcast. Barbie has played cricket at a very high level, and she has an intimate experience with the difficulties of constantly pushing to achieve high performance. Also, Barbie has adopted some interesting thought processes to create a successful, happy life on and off the field. Barbie is also a host of her own podcast called The Inside Edge Project, which you can find a link to in the show notes. Thank you, Barbie, and all the best for the future. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. I actually, before we get started, I actually really am excited to delve into your story a little bit because it's actually full of struggle, which I think is probably one of the most important things that most people do go through in life in general. And it's good for people to listen in and to hear other people's struggle as well. So it might help them through their own kind of story and life situation as well. But before we get started, I need to know, how did you become the mayor of the WBBL village?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me, Matt. But yeah, that's a great question. It actually started off as a bit of a joke, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've been away for a couple of years from the top level system. Thought came back in and we're like, oh, well, who's voting for this? And then it ended up being a public vote. So like, well, there's a lot of Indian cricketers or Indian people that love cricket.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is that I do a bit of coaching and I've got a little bit of a media presence out there, and I thought, well, what would happen if someone who's not really a big cricket name but would probably be pretty popular with the public, what would happen? And it was almost like an experiment. So I was certainly not a big name within the squad or in the hub. I actually didn't even end up playing a game. I snuck my way in there, and we thought we'd test it out as a bit of a joke, and it actually ended up coming through. And
really?
Definitely helped by Elise Villani and Holly Furling, the two of the big media personalities within the squad, and they thought it'd be hilarious to do like a full promo video to try get votes in and all that sort of stuff. So, and it ended up like, apparently, according to the WBBL media team, they said absolutely blew it away.
Really?
And funnily enough, I just about snuck my way into the hub and ended up being the mayor.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So would you have any type of role or anything like that? Just be the face?
It was kind of, I think it was just a bit more of a sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of thing.
Fair enough.
The idea was that I'd be able to like cut the line and be the big name and stuff, but it just didn't sit well with me anyway.
No, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Being shoved on the spotlight, especially because it is a team sport in a way as well. You don't want to
absolutely.
Be highlighted too much.
Yeah, it was quite entertaining, and it's one of those things you look back and you're like, how on earth have I got here? Seriously, like it's just like, what on earth's going on? But it just shows where life takes you.
And now you're back in Perth. Obviously, it's not your first home as well. You're from Zimbabwe.
Yep.
It's correct, isn't it? Yeah, and then you've obviously moved over here and then into Melbourne. It's quite a bit of a whirlwind of a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it keeps coming back to you have no idea where you're going to find yourself. But yeah, born in Zimbabwe, moved to Perth when I was 8. And then with the family, just things were getting pretty dodgy there. And I think my dad moved probably before most people decided to move out. Okay. So it wasn't too bad. Like I had a really good childhood. It wasn't with all the stuff you're seeing now. But very, very grateful to have moved to Perth. Being 8, didn't really, like I was pretty young, so I feel like I'm pretty Australian. But like I wouldn't even had the opportunity to play at all in Zim. There's no real structure there. And like when I moved to Perth, I played heaps of sports. So I just loved it and was just happy to be playing, really.
So when did you went in aligned with cricket? You were playing different sports. When did the decision you were going to stick with cricket?
So I played mostly, so I reckon right up until about 16, 17, I was playing cricket and hockey were my two main sports. Yep. And then it got to the point where with cricket, well, I was never that good at hockey. Like I was playing high-level club stuff, but I was never going to be looking at state level. Whereas cricket, I was playing state stuff since I was 13. So it was just something where it's like, okay, it got more and more serious. And then as I got into I think it was my first year in playing for the Western Fury. So it was 2011. It was like, okay, pre-season starting in June now. So that cut right into hockey season, and I couldn't really play hockey seriously. And then as it got more and more professional, I kind of just gave hockey away and ended up playing more cricket. I actually think I enjoy the game of hockey a bit more, but I was better at cricket and there were more opportunities in cricket. So like as someone who loves sport, the opportunity to play it and get paid a little bit of money back then, I just jumped at it.
What was it about hockey that like you liked the sport? Was it fast-paced?
Probably less brutal, to be honest. So you get to like hockey, you've got 70 minutes. You're out there, you're having a run around. Even if you have a bad game, you feel like you've still done something. You can still contribute, whereas cricket can be brutal. Like the 1 in 10 times that you actually do perform, it's amazing. But the other 9 times within that, it's pretty tough because you like, especially because my main skill was a batter. If I miss out, I'm then done for another week, and then that just builds up and up and up and up until you get to a point where you can get into ruts pretty easily. Whereas I found with hockey, like every weekend, you're contributing in some capacity.
That's an interesting point because cricket is fascinating in that way that it is, you're so, like you have to be mentally switch on and switch off a lot of times, like in between. Like it's so draining throughout the whole game. Like you've got 2 days, 4 days. Sometimes, you've got the test matches you've got for 5, but also you got to be on and off. It is mentally draining. Then if you don't perform or you don't execute, you've got another spell in between hit outs, really, isn't it? And it probably does drain on people a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of different challenges. You've got the idea of switching on and off and making sure you're actually on when you're meant to be on. And because we don't really play the long form, but for one-day cricket, it's 6 hours, especially if you're an all-rounder. Or if you have a good day with the bat, you're batting for 3 hours and then you're fielding and or bowling for 3 hours. And the ability to actually switch on and off at the right time is a skill in itself. And then on top of that, when you're switched on, the question, a bit hard to explain, but is how are you really switched on and are you fully in that moment? Because there's all sort of some subconscious things of like, what's your form like? What's the game situation like? Once we get in professional levels, are you actually playing for your career? And you might be like, you might have 1 or 2 games, and I found that recently playing for Victoria in the last few games of the season. Like you literally have 3 games to prove that you belong at the level, and that's it. And 1 or 2, one ball can change everything. But at the end of the day, your job is just to focus 1 ball at a time and give everything to that 1 ball, despite all the noise that's going on. And that's a challenge in itself, but that's also what makes a player good. You can't avoid it. So you can't avoid that ability to actually be present for that 1 ball at a time. And I think that applies to pretty much everything. If you're talking footy, hockey, anything else, it's actually 1 play at a time. So can you be present to that? If the ball's getting kicked to you, you got to mark it. All that underlying stuff, if you got a lot of noise, it's quite easy to then not execute the simple skill. But if you're able to actually concentrate, Justin Langer says mental toughness is the ability to concentrate, 100% concentration, 1 ball at a time. That's his definition of mental toughness. It's your ability to actually be present to that 1 ball without all the noise impacting you.
Do you have a routine that you kind of block things out? Is there like you go through a process?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the game, I'll have a routine, say for use batting as an example. Switching off is really important. So I'll always walk off. So I kind of use the physical space as an anchor because sometimes it's easier than using your mind. So I'll be off the pitch and that's switch off for me.
Okay.
So that's like, I'll trace a tree or look at the sky or sing a song or like completely switch off. Then I'll walk back onto the pitch, and when I'm sort of in line with the stumps, that's when I'm looking around, okay, now you're like, okay, what's the game situation? What's the bowler doing? What's my plan? And just being really clear on my plan. And then I have a little thing where I tap my bat down and it's just, I kind of feel my feet on the floor. And where that's come from is I really like the phrase, I'm not sure if you've heard it, but it's be where your feet are.
Okay.
And that just brings me back to, okay, be present to this ball. And then it's just about watching the ball. So I'll say something over in my head. That changes. Sometimes it's watch the ball. Sometimes it's go to the line. Sometimes it's see it. But the whole point of me saying that over and over is to stop me thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't not think. So everyone says to you, you just got to have a clear mind. But you can't. It's your brain is made to think. So the idea of saying something is then, so say if I'm saying watch the ball, watch the ball, watch the ball. It's obviously one positive because it's what I want to do, but it also just stops other random thoughts coming into your head, which happens a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that as well because I had John on one last week. He used to play for St Kilda, and one of the things they used to do when they were having like a bad patch, they would have their own like kind of action, but each player would know their own like action, and then if they could tell they're getting in a rut, they'll say, "Go do your action." So Jono's was like to clap his hands really hard, and he had one of his mates was like rub the back of your head or something like that,
Yeah.
and then. So that was like a key for them to move on and to get past that point and to kind of refresh and to go, take the next opportunity and move forward. Don't kind of dread on it or sit back and think about that, because then you can't be effective going forward. So it's interesting to hear those different things that different athletes kind of have.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's basically like an anchor. So
Exactly.
you just cut the split, and it anchors you into reminding you what you've done in a training perspective. Because we all know how to do the skills. It's just about like, okay, bang, cut it. We know what we can do. Let's go again.
Do you find that as well going up into the kind of the higher the level you go in cricket? Is it the skill level is kind of, you don't kind of plateaus off, and it's more how much can you handle mentally, if that kind of makes sense, or how much more pressure you can kind of handle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think pretty much most sports, the higher you go, the skill level's all quite high.
Yeah.
And then it's your ability to actually execute that skill. There certainly is. Like, I still think, I've heard the thing like 90% mental, 10% physical. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think it's more so unlocking your skills. I don't know if you've read The Inner Game of Tennis at all. It's got a brilliant equation that I always talk about. So it's he's Timothy Galway. He's kind of, although it's on tennis, it's like the underlying mental skill. Like, it's one of the best psychology books ever written.
Okay.
And his basic premise is that your overall performance is your potential minus interference. Now, potential is not how great you can be. Your potential is how great you can be right now if there was nothing interfering with you. So my skill level, physical skill level right now, is my potential. So that's all the skills I've got. Over 15 years playing the game, I have a basic level of how I can bat, and that's me at my best. Now, the issue in high pressure or high level, as you mentioned, is interference. So everything, that's all the noise. So whether it's, everyone has their different levels of interference. It could be the pressure of the game. It could be pressure you're putting on yourself. Anything that distracts you from performing your skill in this moment is interference. So your job, generally the higher level you go, the more interference there naturally is. So you need to develop techniques and skills to help reduce that interference, but your potential is still there. So everyone at the top level has a high level of potential because they've worked hard on their craft. Now, the difference is how high is that level of interference. The lower, it'll never be zero because we're humans. Like, it'll never, ever be zero. But the lower you can make that interference, and I could have very minimal interference and have a reasonably high potential, but I may never be as good as Meg Lanning, because Meg Lanning has a really high level of potential because she's way more skilled than I am. But at the same time, on a day that she has a lot of interference, maybe there's a lot of pressure on her, it means that I can be well and truly in the contest. And that's what makes sport great, because anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, just having that balance and how much does affect anyone. And then also even more amazing that some people are really good at blocking the noise out, and some people actually really have to work hard to get to that same level as someone else. So that's probably what interests me a lot more than probably someone who's probably has a high potential, but someone who can kind of block out the noise and can actually perform at their potential is probably the most amazing part of sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the cool part, is that anything can happen on any day. But at the end of the day, you've only got what you can control in that moment.
So when was the kind of moment you had it kind of clicked when like cricket was like, this is going to, like, I've got something here?
It's a great question. I'm not sure it ever did. So I kind of like, in WA, cricket, especially when I was coming through, it's a bit different now, it wasn't that strong. So if you were half good, you kind of could get away with getting into state squads and junior state squads and things like that. And then once I got into the senior program, that's when I started finding it a little bit harder, because all of a sudden everyone's good and you've got to really compete. And I never really cracked it, as I say, like I never really got consistent in the first team and consistent scoring runs, taking wickets. And it was always a battle. Like I never felt like, yep, I've made it. If anything, there was more a moment that I was like, oh, I've got to work hard here. And I really wanted it and I really worked hard, but I never actually feel like I got the results that I wanted. Possibly until the final year, which ironically was the year before I got dropped. So 2018-19 season for WA. That's the year I kind of felt like, oh, yeah, okay, like I belong here. Got my first 50. I think I was in the top couple of run scorers. Started bowling, played every game in the season that year, which I hadn't done at all before. And funnily enough, at the end of that season, you get a phone call from the high performance manager of the WACA saying, oh, we're not going to recontract you this year. So every year prior to that, so I was 8 years in as a contracted player. I always thought I was going to I always thought I was going to get dropped because I just wasn't really consistent. If I played, I'd be batting like 7, not really doing much. It just never really clicked. And then that final year when I got going, had an amazing club season. That's the year I got dropped. And there's a whole lot of reasons for it. It's kind of like, okay, if you look at the grand scheme of things over 8 years, I've not really done much. Getting a little bit older, I wasn't that old then, 26, it's not even hit your peak yet for a cricketer. But there's always different reasons in cricket. One of the big players in Sophie Devine is coming over. They needed to find a spot. I happened to be off contract. So there's all different areas, but it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because up until then I was working really hard. I was doing all this mental stuff that we're talking about, but there was an underlying perspective, and I think an underlying thought process and the stories I was telling myself that weren't really helping me on field and were actually increasing my interference a lot. So they weren't really conscious in that it's like, oh, there's a pressure of the game, or it was more so around fear of failure, fear of who I was, like fear of other people's opinions, and not really being able to tell my own story. So up for the last 10 years, I'd based my value on who I was as a person. I'd base that on my performance. So if I'm performing, I feel great. I'm on top of the world. I'm valuable to the team. I'm valuable as a person. My pride in who I was all based on how I performed. Whereas that's not really in your control. So it's not real. And it's something all athletes and all people, all humans go through. 100%. So you base your value as a person and your worth as a person on either what other people think of you, and that usually relates to how you're performing, and particularly athletes, it's all about performance and perfectionism. And then all of a sudden, if that's not happening, you work harder. So you feel like you've got to do more. I've got to tick all the boxes. I've got to train more. I hit more balls. I hold more balls than anyone else in the whole squad. I remember my coach actually sitting me down and saying, your loads are higher than everybody. You don't need to do more work.
Right.
But this was when we had a coffee after I got dropped, and she said, but there's something missing. She goes, like, I know you're doing the work. I know you've got the talent, but there's something missing. And I think take some time away, work out what it is that you need to do. And at the time I was like, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like I just brushed it off. Yeah. But she was dead right. And it was learning to actually shift my perspective.
Yeah. Do you think that's a maturity thing as well? Like as you got older, you kind of got to reflect back on it at that time, be like, oh, whatever. We can kind of pinpoint what was going on, what you needed to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a combination. So there's a maturity thing in that, the ability to work out what's actually going wrong.
Yep.
The second thing though, which like I'm 28 now, so we're 2 years down the track, but I know people that have retired and are mid-30s, 40s that have never actually seen the light. So they're still bitter about their careers. Like we just had a recent coach. You can tell he's still bitter about his own career. And it's still like, oh, I did all this stuff and then no one picked me and blaming everyone else. And like I don't know for sure, but I feel like it's something that's not just maturity and getting older. You've got to actually do the work and help. Maybe it's someone that helps you shift that perspective to be able to say, well, actually, let's take some responsibility here. Definitely it improves with getting older and being more mature, but I also think that it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was lucky in that I came across a guy, Noddy Holder, who's quite a famous batting coach here in WA. So he's had a ridiculous amount of test players. Justin Langer is probably his most famous, Nicole Bolton in the female game. And just after I got dropped, he literally pulled me aside and he said, look, high performance programs can sometimes be like a prison. So when you go to prison, what happens is they take all your belongings away from you. They take away the clothes you're wearing. They say, you're going to wear our clothes. You're going to eat at this time. You're going to work at this time. You're going to stay. They control everything that you do and take away your belongings. And he goes, if you don't learn to bring your belongings in a different way with you, then you're going to get sucked into that prison. And so he used that analogy, and I was like, okay, that's a bit of a stretch. Like,
did you feel that it was like prison?
Not at the time.
Okay.
Not at the time.
Yeah.
But now on the other side of it, I do understand what he was saying. And it was by no means of the high performance program. It's more the perspective that I brought into that.
Yeah. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
So like you have to have certain rules. Like you have to do your strength conditioning. You have to bat at a certain time, bowl at a certain time. Like that you can't just go in and do what you want in a team sport. So there has to be rules of engagement, but it doesn't mean I can't bring my we use the word spirit, but I can't bring my spirit or who I am into that situation. So all of a sudden I'd lost like the freedom, and this is the way I love to play. All of a sudden I was trying to play like I thought I should play to get into the team rather than just being my best.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So all of a sudden everything I was doing was trying to please others. So I was trying to find, okay, the spot in the team is a spin bowler that bats 6. Okay, I'm going to transform myself into a spin bowler that bats 6 rather than just being everything I can be and trusting that it will work out.
That's hard for someone to accept that, isn't it? And to kind of go on, because you want to have that kind of sense of security behind of if I can do like be a spin bowler, bat at 6, then I know I can I get into the team that way instead of just being the person who I am. Because a lot of people, I guess, are insecure that way about themselves.
Absolutely, and that it makes sense. Like you've got a spot available, that's what I'm going to try and be to get in the team. But as a long-term strategy, I'm not sure it's useful. And like I wouldn't have realised that until I was out of the system. And then I had a pretty incredible year or two where I was completely out of professional sport, thought it was the worst thing ever. And I was like, this is horrible, like I'm at my peak, blah, blah, blah. But I learned some key lessons and you could say rediscovered that spirit or rediscovered that sense of why I play and how I want to play, and had the best couple of years I've ever had. So
it was just enjoying the game.
Yeah.
Enjoying yourself as a sports.
Yeah, I think it's defining what joy is as well. So initially, so I went to Ireland firstly for 6 weeks, and cricket's not as developed there. So it was, to be honest, a bit of a piss up. And just had the best time ever, but still playing cricket, and discovered like it didn't even matter. Like I could get 6 ducks and it didn't matter. No one cared. Like it was just about pure enjoyment. And then after that, I got a phone call from a friend in Melbourne and was like, well, why don't you come over to Melbourne? The standard of grade cricket's much better. It's something new. Like there could be opportunities for Victoria. You never know. And I was like, absolutely not.
Oh, really?
The dumbest idea ever, because Victoria are one of the strongest teams in the state. So Melbourne's, like, yes, they have 2 big bash teams, so there's more spots available, but they're so strong. I was like, I can't even crack it over here in WA, which is one of the weakest states. And he's like, exactly. So I was very confused. But so he was like, well, you're going to stop trying to always get to the next level. So you're going to stop trying to always chase something, and you need to be better and do more. And it's like, you can just come here and play. Like, just play. Just play grade cricket, like rediscover that love of the game. And on top of that, so I went to Ringwood Cricket Club, and it was my first time they asked me to captain because they were a really young team. So on top of that, instead of thinking about myself all the time, I started to think about others. And it's like, okay, how can I help you be better? Or like as a captain, you have to be about other people. You can't be all about yourself. So the combination of 1, being in Ireland, learning to enjoy the game, 2, just being present. Like for Ringwood, playing for Ringwood wasn't about trying to play for Victoria, whereas over here, playing for Midland Guildford was about trying to play for WA. So it was just about, like, went back to what we did at the start, the ability to be present to one ball at a time. I could do that because there wasn't all this noise about, oh, if I score 100 today, I'm going to get picked, or if I get a duck today, I'm not going to get picked, all that noise that doesn't help you. And then the third part was stopping focusing on myself. So it's all counterintuitive things. Like you're told, oh, focus on yourself, work hard. Like if you do this, then you'll get that. And it's like the if and then model of happiness. If you do this, then this will happen. And it's all completely flipped everything that I knew on its head. I'm talking, this is not in one moment. This is over 18 months.
Okay. Still though, by the time you would kind of get settled in or felt comfortable with something else, you'd have to think of something else and challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different challenges that came along, but I think the result of those 3 things is I had the best season I've ever had. Like averaged close to 50, took 30 wickets in a season. and ended up winning the Una Paisley medal, which is the best player in the comp over there, and getting recontracted. So with Victoria and the Melbourne Stars in this season just gone, which is something, it was almost, if I'm honest, it was an accident. Like I had no intention to go. Like I thought it was impossible. I genuinely, it was just kind of a bit of fun. I'm going to go for a year and then I'll try being an adult after that. And then,
right. Wow.
So yeah, like it's just bizarre how things change quickly.
What do you kind of, if you wanted to say, you probably can't say one thing, but those multiple things kind of helped you get there.
Like the most important.
Yeah, what was kind of the most?
I think it was learning to. It's a hard question, very hard question. I think it was that ability to learn to be present where I am, which is a bit of a cliche, but the ability to actually do that. So, say the good example actually. So, say the year before I got dropped, I was doing all this mental skill stuff. So I had my routine when I was batting and be where your feet are, feel your feet on the floor. And I was doing all those things, but was I fully 100% body, mind, spirit exactly there in that spot? Probably not. Whereas I think for Ringwood, I was, because I wasn't thinking about 27 different things as what's the outcome of me performing today.
Okay.
It was just
removing everything.
Yeah. It wasn't about playing that game. And then the other part that recently I've only worked out is the idea of joy is not always being like playing with a smile on your face and happy and enjoying. It's sometimes just being engaged. Some people play really well when they're fully engaged in the contest. And it doesn't mean they're laughing and smiling, but they just love that competitiveness of being fully engaged. So being all of you in that moment. And that for me is joy and discovering that. And that's something that's only come to me in probably last month, to be honest.
Okay.
And it's not always about having a smile on your face, but if you can be fully engaged in the contest and fully present and exploring with that curiosity is probably a really good word. So you're just exploring about what's happening now rather than controlling. So that's kind of the difference.
Does that, in terms of like the coaches you have around you as well, do you to work off them like with technique and that sort of stuff, and then as well the mental side? Was there you were bouncing ideas off of coaches?
Yeah, I think a little bit of everything. Noddy's probably the guy that has the full package in terms of we discuss everything, and he could always pinpoint the origin of an issue. But overall, he's based here, so I was living in Melbourne. So and we only worked together for 2 or 3 months. But in Melbourne, I think it's like just chatting to people around you. I had a couple of. So Una Raymond Hoey plays for Ireland, and met her in Ireland, and she's now in Melbourne. So she was one of my best mates. We used to train together every day. And like we'd always bounce ideas off each other, whether it's technical, mental. A lot of skills coaches are generally more on your technique. But I think the best coaches have both. So you don't need to necessarily sit down with a sports psychologist. I think a good coach can do both. A good coach knows what the problem is or what you need to work on to get somewhere. And maybe they need a bit of expertise from a psych or a specific skills coach or something, but I think a good coach knows the full enough about the full package. Yeah,
it's so interesting. It's so hard as well for a coach to and also as well kind of be like an athlete as well. Sorry, I was going to go back to the being like a competitor and being an athlete. When was it your mate said come over and just play the sport? Did you find that difficult? Because I can imagine that if you're being competitive, you just want to be better and always try to one up yourself, because if you want to get better all the time, and to say that just enjoy and just play is kind of hard for someone who's naturally competitive.
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and that's where a lot of coaches say, just enjoy it, just go and have fun. It's like it's not that easy to actually just do that. Great question. I think I actually jumped at it because there was the challenge of being a captain. And also I knew that the grade competition was much better there. So my choice, to be honest, was stay here and play grade or go there and play grade. Like I wasn't contracted in the state system. And the grade comp here it's really not that strong. So it's totally different to the men's system. There's only 4 teams here and 2 grades.
Oh, wow.
In Melbourne, there's 8 teams and 3 grades. And you've got a lot more ex-first-class cricketers playing. You've got a lot more talented kids playing. It's just bigger population, really. Like it's just, I think it's the same in most sports, to be honest. So that kind of pulled me across, and that even though it was over there to have fun in a sense, I knew it was as good as cricket as I'll get playing women's cricket. Otherwise, I could have played men's here, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So there still was that challenge, which I jumped at.
Okay, so that was your perception of the challenge, not getting better scores and winning and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so like I still, what I mentioned, so you still got the challenge, but all of a sudden that challenge was based around helping others. It wasn't based around all about me and I need to do this and the ego kind of things.
The change of perception.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very crazy. It's interesting. You ever look back and go like just how not how easy, but like how different things would have been like if you had that little bit of a change of perception earlier, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's easy to look back and half regret or wish you had different things. But if I put myself in those shoes, say when I was 22, with the view I had in the world, the things I knew, everything, like I'd make the same decisions.
Yeah.
So you can't, I think you just go around in circles if you sit here and say, oh, I wish I had done that when I was 22. Where it's like, well, I did everything I could and I did the best I could with the resources I had at the time. And I think you've just got to accept that. Like that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
But in saying that, like now what I'm doing for work and like as I mentioned with my own podcast is try and actually help people in that age bracket.
Yeah.
So they can potentially, because Noddy was a guy and a few others around me that completely helped shift my perspective. And there's like Ben Crow's doing great work in this space. There's another guy, Drew Broughton. So there's a lot of people starting that I learnt off and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is incredible stuff. And what if we could help people from 15 to 25 rather than discover this when they're 30?
Did that stem from you being a captain as well, like wanting to help other people?
Yeah, I think I've always liked coaching. And I've always liked, there's something. I was coaching an under 15 hockey team when I was 17. So like, I don't know why I've really enjoyed coaching. So like I potentially might end up being a better coach than a player. Because like I enjoy the game, I do a lot. I'm not particularly naturally gifted, so I've always had to work my way through it. But I don't know, we'll find out.
It's always hard as well, especially trying to separate athlete and coach. That's probably the difficult part as well. But being so captaining and then obviously having kind of a passion for coaching as well, what do you kind of like what do you kind of try to take away from being an athlete and you want to try to help out the athletes you're coaching? Do you try to take a bit of your own experiences and help them out with it as well? Or?
That's a constant challenge, So like you don't want to, like with coaching, and something I've learned is that you don't want to just put your own stories and your own presumptions onto someone else. But at the same time, the intel you have is based on your own experience. So it's separating, okay, I kind of have an idea of what needs to be done here, but let's help the athlete work it out for themselves. So it's more about asking questions. So like, okay, say they keep getting out the same way and asking them what they think the issue is, or asking them, like prompting them to work it out themselves. And I think that encourages longer term learning. Whereas if you just come in and say, oh, well, if you're not doing this, this is how you should play. And then they try it and maybe that's not working for them. Maybe they're a different player. Maybe they have a better idea than you. And because then you're not planting ideas and their brains actually come up with something that's way more creative. Let them work it out. And that's, again, the best coaches probably don't tell you the best things, but they ask the best questions.
Right.
And that's where I found the difference. But it is a constant challenge because, like, I know you do a bit of coaching as well, and it's just like you want to say something, but you've got to kind of work out when you're saying too much.
100%.
And that's a challenge in itself.
Always just try to keep it simple, stupid. Like just like keep it simple, stupid. That's one, and then less is like sometimes I don't even say a lot of things. Like some sessions, like recent, like lately, like in season, it's an E Cup. You want to like you don't go hard in training session, kind of like maintenance and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes I might not even say a lot in the actual session, like in terms of technique and cueing, that sort of stuff. Sometimes I might just go up and just have a chat with the guys. That's probably the only thing I might say. And then I'll give an introduction to the session and go through stuff that I want to focus on. But other than that, just try to keep it simple. So the players, sometimes if they want to come up with something, they can talk to me about it. I'm open. Then most of them do know that I'm open for most things. But yeah, it wasn't always ever like that too. Like I had to grow and develop and realize that, being mentored by other coaches and looking at them critically and being maybe they lack in this area, and maybe I need to work on this before, like my skill as a coach as well. Different kind of areas like communicating more effectively is probably the biggest one, is being a coach, obviously.
Yeah.
Being able to communicate.
That's awesome. No, I love that.
So you're also mentoring. You do a bit of cricket mentoring as well on the side. Is that separate to the coaching and everything else?
Yeah, I'm doing probably too many million things at the moment. But so yeah, working with cricket mentoring as a company, like Tom Scollay, who started that's a genius. He's someone that works incredibly hard to build what he has built, and someone that's also shifted the perspective of what coaching is. In the traditional cricket world, you'd go to your coach, you'd be working on your front arm or your front elbow, and all these, like, cricketers are all overthinkers. It's very rare to meet a cricketer that's not an overthinker.
Yep.
And he kind of shifted the dynamic and found that most problems, as you mentioned before, are mental and are to do with how you think, and has built basically a company through social media, so lots of people can access it, that helps all your, like he has the pillars of performance, so your mental, physical, tactical, technical, I can't remember his other two, lifestyle I think was one. And yeah, I just totally connected with that. So I reached out to him a few years ago and knew he was based in Perth, and said, hey, like, I actually sent him a podcast, Finding Mastery, that I really liked. And I was like, hey, I think you might like this. And that was it. I was just like, thanks for your content, really enjoying it. And then we just got talking from there, and he was looking for someone in the female game to help him out. And at that point, still aren't many female coaches around. So we connected and ended up doing a bit of work. So that's kind of, if there's any stuff in the women's game that come up, I'll help him out. Okay. And we'll do a bit of coaching. We went to India together last year, which was really cool. And so, yeah, on top of that, I do my own sort of mentoring, and that's more so, it's kind of in the mental space, but I talk about it more as like it's just performance coaching, because it's everything. It's not just mental.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of starting off with that at the moment.
That's cool.
A lot in cricket, but looking to expand and just kind of see where it takes.
Do you look to, what are you kind of doing to kind of increase your knowledge in that area, like the mental space? Are you like reading books? Are you studying anything?
Yeah, so when it started, it was a lot of listening to podcasts, reading books. Then I'm currently studying my Cert 4 in elite athlete wellbeing management.
Oh, cool.
Which is kind of cool. So that's helping with some like practical tools, and it always helps to have some sort of formal qualification. And then, a lot of it, to be honest, is reading books, listening to podcasts. I think some of the best content I've got are of people that aren't necessarily psychologists. They're actually people that have just been in the weeds and been there themselves. So as I mentioned, Drew Broughton, someone in England, he's an ex-pro footballer. He calls himself the fear coach or something like that.
The fear coach. The
fear coach. And he is, when I first saw it, I was like, Drew, not sure about that handle, but he is unbelievable. Like, he gets it. So he's basically a performance coach, working with footballers in the Premier League. He does a lot of business coaching as well. And he's got an incredible story. His book is called, it's a really good book. I actually can't remember. But, and then what? So his idea, and then what? Because his idea is that, like, there's this whole idea of this destination that everyone's trying to get to, and then you'll be happy. So it's like, well, you never get there. So you constantly think, okay, I'll be happy when I play for Australia. You play for Australia, then all of a sudden you're not. And it's that constant, like, if and then model of happiness. And he has an incredible story. I highly recommend reading. He self-published it, which is pretty cool. But he was full, I think it was a sex addiction, potential alcoholic. He played for 22 different clubs in 16 years because he kept getting fired. Like, so he'd get it, like, he'd perform really well, but then he'd be too aggressive and every coach is trying to control him. And then he'd say get red cards, he'd get sent off, he'd get all sorts, and he just kept cycling through and ended up in a deep, dark hole and never really rediscovered his best. But from that, when he he underwent like the 12 steps kind of full process and discovered pretty much similar story to mine, except a lot more extreme, I think. And rediscovered it. And he's all about, like, embracing your fears and the idea of surrendering. Right. And that's the biggest thing I got from him, is that, like, you actually have to surrender that you don't know what's going to happen. So every coach comes in with, that pre-game. Think about a change room before a game, and you're like self-belief, confidence. We got this, boys or girls. Go, 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 go. But it's like, well, actually, you don't know. You actually don't know what's going to happen on the field. So it's completely flipping the mind. Like, you'd rather be encouraging self-belief than you would be slamming everyone, 100%. But what if you could shift the perspective to say that, well, we actually don't know what's going to happen today. We don't know. But we're going to give it everything we have. We know what we're good at. We know what we can control. We're going to explore with curiosity. We're going to embrace flow, embrace freedom, and see where we land. We're just going to see what happens today. And that's something we shifted at Ringwood, and after like reading about Drew's work, and Johnny Wilkinson's another one that talks a lot about this.
Yeah.
In shifting from, so we found ourselves mid-season second on the ladder. We were literally second last year, and we're like, oops, don't know what to do. Started to lose. We lost a couple of clutch matches, and it was like, hang on, what's going on here? We were playing with freedom, expression, like we were just unbelievable. A group of young players all enjoying it. We're winning games of cricket. All of a sudden, we started to talk about finals. So we turned into the new year, finals around the corner. We're like, oh, this is great. We're going to make finals. And that expectation comes. So even though we've been winning and we're confident, there's now expectation to win. And we started to lose some games, which was very and lose games that we should have won.
Okay.
Like, it was like we're in the best possible position and have essentially choked. And just chatting to, again, Una and our coach, like, I think we just hit some expectation here. And all of a sudden we're talking about, oh, you guys are good enough. We know we're good enough. We've scored 300. We've scored 200. We're great. Like, this is fine. And then it's like, well, what if we just remove that altogether and just play? Why were we good in the first place? Because we had no expectation. Everyone's like, Ringwood are shit. No, Ringwood are no good. It's like we had no expectation, but we're working really hard. So we shifted the conversation to be more about, well, we've already won the season. That's what we said. We've improved, and that was our goal at the start. We're in the top four. Like, no one even imagined we'd be in the top four. We've already succeeded in that. Everyone's improved. Everyone's enjoying their cricket. So how about we just go out there and see what happens? Let's just see what happens.
Wow.
Fully embrace exploration, and freedom and flow rather than control. So like Johnny Wilkinson says, he's great. He's like, you show me someone that's full of self-belief, I'll show you someone that's fragile. It's a complete shift in how you think about things. Because if you have self-belief, then you have something to lose.
Right.
You show me someone who is full of exploration, and I'll show you someone who can create anything, because there's nothing to lose. You're just like, I am as I am, but I'm just going to explore. I'm going to see what happens. If I do my processes, if I concentrate one but all the time, if I am your processes are things that are 100% you can control, 100%. So like as a bowler, you can 100% control your routine. You can't control what the batter's going to do. So there's no point going in and saying, I'm going to have a great day today, because you actually don't know. Someone else could be in flow state and completely smash you, even though you've done everything you can. So it's different. It's a different way of thinking.
That's very interesting way of thinking. Did you, like, so instead of, for example, like that bowler, I'm going to have a good day today, what do you say instead? Is there anything you say? I
think like as a coach, you don't want to go in and be like, no, you're not. Or it's more redirecting the conversation to your processes.
Yep.
And I love the phrase, let's see what happens today. So if you do this, and it's great, you're feeling good about yourself, what's important? What's important? Like the acronym WIN, what's important now? Yeah. So what's important now? Let's see what happens today. And that in a short term, like if someone's in a good space, let them be, that's fine. But you don't want to then create that. I don't know if that makes sense. So if someone's like, oh, I'm going to have a great day today, it's like, that's okay. Bring them back to process.
Okay. Yep.
And then if someone's in a really poor state, you still bring them back to the same place.
Yeah.
Like
I understand.
Process. Let's see what happens.
So everything's the process, and the system itself is the governor of success, I guess, or the way you want to.
So like you can be distracted in both positive and negative ways.
Yeah.
So you can be, if you're overconfident, up and about, or I've just made 100. How many people make back-to-back hundreds? Very, very few. Because you can be distracted in a positive sense, and you can be distracted in a negative sense. As coaches and sports psychs and mental skills, we always talk about the negative sense and how do we increase confidence and increase self-belief, where it's like, well, it's still a distraction from your process, because your process doesn't care what you did yesterday. Your process doesn't care how well you trained or how poorly you trained. Right now, your job is to hit this ball or to take this mark or to kick this straight. Like before and after is actually irrelevant, positive and negative. It's about now. And that's about curiosity and exploration now.
So was that a simple kind of transition at the club? Was it
Ringwood? Yeah.
Ringwood?
Yep.
Was that like kind of seamless transition, or was it kind of like the stage is like you implemented it and then a couple of weeks you kind of saw the improvements from that, or was it kind of instant?
It was actually we actually saw a lot of instant changes because we had this conversation pre-game, literally game day. Yeah. I was like, this is risky, but we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, we got nothing to lose again because we've choked in 2 games straight here. What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
So, and everyone started using this. What I loved is some of our young kids were using that terminology. They'd be like, oh, we've already won. Let's see what happens today. I'm like, yep, I'm going to give this a crack. Different people, though, within took a bit longer. So some got it straight. As a whole, I'd say we shifted pretty quickly.
Yep.
But they're definitely different personalities.
People, they're so different.
Yeah, you can get the concept, but the ability to actually apply that concept. I probably, to be honest, myself took a bit longer to actually apply that because I felt responsible as captain for us losing, and I felt responsible that I felt a lot of the load because our major issue was not being able to take wickets, and I think the ability to take wickets comes down to beat the captain a lot because it's a lot of it is having good getting your bowlers in the right frame, having the right tactics, and I think cricket is a weird game in that your captain a good captain can win and lose you game.
100%, yeah, it is.
So I think I took longer to actually, although I understood the concept, I took longer to actually apply that than a lot of the girls, if I'm honest, on reflection. But we ended up getting so close. Like we dropped out of the top 4 and then it came down to the last game of the season and we needed to win with a bonus point and we were 1 ball away from it.
Oh, wow.
We got so close. But again, sitting back and in theory we failed to make the top 4. But
from where the start of the season was.
The growth was unbelievable.
Yeah, right. So is it hard to kind of, if you lose a game and going with that mindset, do you kind of cheat way of saying, oh, that's all right, we didn't expect much anyway? Or was that, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I do know what you're saying. It kind of gives you a cop-out in one sense. But you've got to that's where you've got to be disciplined as a coach and as a player and ruthless in, okay, why did we lose that? Or why did I perform badly? It's not because, that's okay. But it's like, did you do everything in your control? Yes or no? And that's where you've got to be really disciplined, particularly as a coach, to say that, no, that's not a cop-out. Like you, for example, 100% fielding's an easy one. So diving for a ball, that is 100% in your control. Whether or not you catch it or not, we'll find out. But if you didn't put 100% into diving for the ball to try and get it or run it fast as you possibly could, that's not good enough. Then that's not just because you're exploring to see what happens. You can't explore if you don't give it everything. So you've got to give it everything. And if you put 100% into chasing that ball, you put in a dive and it didn't come off, that's okay. We were just exploring to see if you could get it. We're going to see if you can get that ball. But if you didn't put everything in, well, you've not explored. You've not done what's in your control. And so you can't just say, we're just going to see what happens anyway. You're going to see what happens if you put in the work and you do everything that you possibly can in your control. Wow. That's what exploration is. So there is a difference.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
It is an interesting kind of concept as well because that's a new fact for me today.
Yeah, well, it completely shifts everything that we talk about in performance. And everything that I knew was, do more, work harder.
Yeah.
Or get your confidence up, get your self-belief up. Well, what is confidence? It's like, how would you define confidence?
Well, I would say confidence would be knowing that I've done exactly what you're saying, knowing that you've done everything leading into the game. Like you've done your training, just because you haven't trained, you might not have trained the best, but you've done the training, you've ticked off your gym, you've done your recovery, you've eaten properly. Yep. That would probably give me confidence going to a game if I was playing.
Yep.
So again, that's exactly what you're saying. It's more about the process.
Yeah. So there's 2 levels of confidence. So you've got confidence in your processes, which you've absolutely nailed. But what a lot of people don't talk about is confidence in who you are. So how do you actually let go? So it's easy for me to sit here and say this. Am I the best player in the world right now? No. Because there's a difference being able to say this to be able to do it. So there's a concept called unconditional confidence.
Yep.
And that's when you're like, well, okay, I've got confidence in my processes because I've trained them. And absolutely, that's a non-negotiable. But then I've got unconditional confidence in who I am, because now I don't value myself or my worth as a person on how I perform today, because at the end of the day, it's sport. And we're all going to go and have a beer together after the game, or a milkshake, or whatever it is you do. And I'm going to be like, I have values, and the way I live is how I value myself. So was I kind? Was whatever, everyone has their different things. Did I treat people well? These are the things that I value myself on. And if I'm doing that, then whether or not I get a duck or 100, yes, it hurts. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, of course.
But I have confidence that I'm still a worthy human.
Yeah. You don't kind of connect your identity with being a cricketer. Yeah.
Simple way of saying it. It's the identity shift. And that's where unconditional confidence comes from. And that's what I had to learn in these last 2 years. I didn't have that. So I had confidence in my processes because I worked hard, but because I didn't have that underlying thing, I could never let go. I could never actually let go and explore. I always needed to control something in some capacity.
Yeah, letting go. That's hard.
Yeah.
I also like to go back to where we said, and then what? That's the biggest one, I think, with like, say, just talk about, I watch a lot of fighting, the UFC.
Yeah.
The guys who do become champion might only last like one or two championship fights, or title defenses, sorry. And then they kind of fall off because they've reached the pinnacle of what it is. And then I'm here, then what? You know, the ones like the greatest of all times and all that sort of stuff are the ones who stay at the top and can continue to find something to keep them going. They're the ones that's everywhere as well, like Richmond Footy Club. They're the ones who've come off. And even probably you look back at the Australian cricketing teams probably in the early mid-2000s with Aaron, is it Buchanan? I think his first name. John Buchanan, the coach there, continued to keep going. They were such a successful team. I can't remember the streak of testaments.
I can't remember. But you bang on. And like Richmond is someone who's really embracing this stuff. So they're leading the way. I think it was in 2016, maybe. I might probably get the years wrong. Trent Cotchin was voted the worst captain in the AFL officially. The worst?
Yeah. There's a competition? I didn't even hear about that.
No, I didn't even know this was a thing. But
that's
it was
a thing.
Like they were basically they ordered. I don't know the actual thing, but you don't vote them the worst, but he was ranked the lowest. So you'd vote for the best, basically.
Oh, okay.
So you vote for the best, and then he was ranked the lowest. So you're not like you are the worst.
I want to say that is horrible.
No, so I think they do like a ranking of, or you vote for your captain of the year kind of thing, and he was at the bottom. So the year after, though, I'm definitely getting these years wrong, but the year after, Richmond, so Ben Crowe, Shane McCurry, there's I've got their mindfulness coach, Emma Murray as well, came in and worked specifically with the leadership group. So Trent Cotchin, Damien Hardwick, on vulnerability, on connection, about owning your own story, about lack of control, surrendering. And it was all about connection. There's actually, someone's written a book about it, about Richmond specifically, and how they fully embraced connection along with their president, is it Penny? Can't remember. The year after, anyway, Trent Cotchin was voted the number one captain in the AFL. And he speaks quite openly about this, and same with Hardwick. They completely shifted. So he thought he needed to be perfect. So he thought of that. That's crazy. I need to be perfect. We need to be perfect. We're going to drill everyone. I'm not going to open up because I need to be this strong, ambitious leader. Like, that's what a captain is. And Hardwick was the same. Coach, we need to be the big, like, beacon of what it should be to be a perfect AFL player or captain or coach. And then that off season, they completely flipped that on its head. And it became about celebrating imperfection and being vulnerable and telling your stories. And they made the whole hero hardship highlight thing famous. And actually just being human. Like, just take 100%. The pressure off. It just takes the pressure off. And then, like, there's his most successful team the last 5 years.
And it's interesting what Johnny was talking about, the touch and that sort of stuff. He was saying that came from Richmond when Dan Butler ended up moving over to St Kilda, and then they had something similar, but he kind of clarified it amongst the group. So it's amazing now how they started it, and other teams are picking up on other things, and that's probably one of the most important things as well. It's why I wanted to start a podcast up, because I work amongst footy, and I work in the waffle, and I work with over in hockey at Waste as well, and it's just seeing people the way they are, like, and then they're actually just those people, and then people don't realise that, you know, what they see on the TV or what they see, they don't see the personality side behind it, how funny some of these guys are, and the stories behind it, and it just sometimes just go, man, you don't understand. Like some of the time they don't have the respect.
Absolutely, and like if you think about where this whole idea of perfectionism is created from, media, social media, advertising, saying these are the people we put on a pedestal, and they are perfect. But what you just said, they're just humans. Like, are they perfect? No. Do they have imperfections? Absolutely. But all we see as an external people is that, it's for me to be recognised and to me to be worthy and whatnot, I need to be like them. But that's not the whole story. That's not real. That's just media. Like they select things and like
it's almost fake. Yeah,
it is fake. It's completely fake. so how is it real? Like, why would you then? And social media, I'm a huge fan of it. Like, I think social, like learning from people that I admire through social's been incredible. But at the same time, it provides a really easy way to compare yourself to what's perfect.
Yeah, that's the wrong way to look at it.
So you just need to be a bit careful with that sort of stuff.
No. That was probably the biggest thing when I was young, or when I was young, first getting to coaching, and I was like, wow, I'm standing amongst people who played AFL, and now I'm just a kid who kind of grew up and was never good at anything really. Yeah. And I was like, well, wow, like, this, it was a weird kind of, because it is fake. It's weird now looking back on it, being like, that was just, it's not even real like that.
No.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're a bowl bit of leg spin.
Yeah.
You got a bit of tips for anyone out there? So anyone who want to go in the backyard cricket and throw,
if I'm honest,
roll the arm
with leg spin, don't do it. Don't do it.
There it is. Give up.
Don't do it to yourself. Nah.
Because it is. You were saying cricketers are so fanatic. It's almost like you're like a golfer. You're so everything is over. Like you swing, you're like, oh, everything needs to be a millimeter. And it's also even more for leg spin because it's so hard, isn't it?
Well, I only started bowling probably 5 years ago now. Again, it actually started with that whole thing of WA needs a spinner, and I wasn't really bowling at that point. Okay. It's like, I'm learning leg spin, why not? And I'm not sure how I got through those first few years. It is one of the hardest skills in any sport. Like, it's just one thing slightly out, and I've never seen, like, it's very rare you see, like, you can be bowling absolute Shane Warne, drift, spin, bounce, and feel amazing, and the very next day the ball's bouncing twice, and it's just like, what on earth is going on here?
Yeah.
But it teaches you some good resilience. And,
I bet.
And like every skill, it's basics are best. Like, drill your basics, do your basics. Yes, it's harder to learn those basics. But at the end of the day, like,
I bet
that's what makes you good.
Picking up late is almost harder as well. On the bowling? Not really?
A bit of both. Like, I thought harder initially, but actually, because I had some basic skills already, it helped. Okay. So I probably learned a lot faster.
It's all on the wrist, yeah? Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's so many things. It drives me balmy. But the good thing is, like, the reason it's great is because you get such a good, when you are on, you're taking wickets. It's always say an off spinner's good ball doesn't take, like, it might take wicket. A leg spinner's good ball almost always does.
Why is that? Because from a right-handed batter, it's going away from the bat a little bit?
Yeah, one aspect, but also you get more revs on the ball. So by using your wrist, using your wrist, like as a finger spinner, yes, you use your body, but the final thing is literally your fingers if you look at how small your fingers are. Whereas a wrist spinner, you're engaging your slings a lot better. You're engaging more muscle, so you get more revs on the ball.
Interesting.
It's just harder to control.
Yes.
So that it just does more. And then wrist spin, you can turn it both ways. You can bowl slide. There's so many variations. It's so much more fun, but it is more difficult.
Yeah, the wrong end. You got the wrong end? Yeah, the flipper?
Yeah, no flipper. That's a tough one. I actually bowl more wrong ends than I do leggies. I'm trying to get my leggy going properly. So naturally, probably because I came from medium pace, I bowl wrong ends. And then, leggies, I'm working on my leggy. It's getting there. Yeah. So it's to get the one actually turning away. The odd one slides on. I have no idea why, but my theory is that if I don't know what's happening, the batter's not. So
yep, even better. Now, as a batter as well, take away the mental stuff we spoke about.
Yep.
What's kind of the technical aspect of batting that probably someone needs to drill hard on to improve their batting?
Watch the ball would be a start. And it's amazing how hard it is. It's amazing. Like, it's simple, but it's amazing how many times you forget to actually watch the ball. Like, it sounds so dumb. But you'd be like, well, were you watching the ball? It's like, yeah, you kind of generally be like, no, were you actually watching the ball? Like, other than that, I reckon everyone's so different.
When you watch the ball, are you saying watch the ball straight away, like from as soon as the bowler's coming in, like you're watching it from the hand?
Well, you can't actually see every bit of the ball. So if you track, you only see so as in so 20 meters,
Yep.
your eyes can actually only see the ball at 4 points. Like, so if they put like eye trackers and stuff
Yep.
in terms of actual research, you can see it kind of as it's released,
Yep.
and you see it at about 4 points until it gets to you. So you can't actually, in theory, watch the ball all the way onto your bat.
Yep.
But it's more so like I'm big on watching the release. So like watching it out of the hand, and then I know I'll just react, because if I see it out of the hand, then I know I'm going to the line, going towards the line of the ball.
Yep.
And if you're going, like if you wanted to sort of one technical point, it would be going towards the line of the ball, because then all your energy is going through the ball. Whereas if you see, and I'm talking about your weight, so it's not like the cricket snuffs off talking about footwork and stuff, but your footwork's not as important. It's about getting your weight into the ball or away from the ball. And if like
that's a good point.
Yeah,
because you can see now modern cricket, like T20s, there's not a lot of footwork really. They probably play back, give it a little bit more time, and then it's all about body weight through the ball.
Yeah, it's a bit more baseball-like. So Glenn Maxwell's completely open, AB de Villiers completely open, but they're stable and still. So they're really still when the ball's released, which helps you watch the ball. I often say to young kids, you never read a book doing this with your head, shaking your head everywhere, do you? So it's like when you're reading a book, your head's still.
Yeah. That's so true. There you go.
So if your head's still and your eyes are still, then you can watch the ball, and then it's about transferring your weight into the ball. And that's batting in a nutshell. So everyone talks about feet and hands and all sorts of stuff, which can be important. But like for me, if you're still, which allows you to then watch the ball, and then you're transferring your energy into it, however you do that, because everyone's different, then you're going a long way to making some runs.
Do you find swing, so what the hardest ball to face? In swinger, out swinger?
For me?
Oh, yes.
For me, probably in swinger.
Yeah. Is it because obviously you see it and then it changes?
Yeah, well, you just get less room to swing. So with an out swinger, everyone's different. So for me, I like width. And so if I've got width to swing my hands, I can release my hands through the ball. So if it's out swing, you can obviously have more width. Whereas if the ball's coming back into you, all of a sudden you have to be quite compact. And generally an in-swing is going to challenge the batter's defence a bit more in the women's game, because we don't have as much pace and bounce. Whereas, and the white ball doesn't swing that much anyway. So, so the more you can challenge the stumps, the better. Okay. Whereas red ball will swing for longer. Yep. So we don't really have to battle. The hardest part with women's cricket is the lack of pace. So I find men's cricket a lot easier. Because
the ball comes on.
Because the ball comes on. So you get away with so much, and you can just time it and it goes. Whereas women's cricket, you've got to find a way to create pace. And to create pace, often it brings... So if you're swinging hard, it's like golf. You know when you swing really hard and it goes nowhere?
I've no trouble. That's my trouble in golf.
Whereas when you're nice and compact and all of a sudden it goes beautifully.
Yeah.
So it's easier to be compact when you're not swinging as hard. So in men's cricket, because the ball's coming on fast, so you don't have to swing as hard.
That's why I say them a graceful shot is one they don't even like. It doesn't look like they're trying,
But with women's cricket, because there's less pace on the ball, you have to actually swing. Like you can't just 90% of the time you can't just touch it. So it brings in a lot more challenges in that aspect. But then we don't have to deal with 140 plus coming at your head, which is an entirely different challenge. So they're both challenging, but as a general rule, I'd much prefer to play men's grade cricket. I'd never be able to play men's first class cricket way too fast.
Okay.
But like in terms of grade cricket, much prefer playing men's and women's.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's interesting. What's the one ball that's going to get you out? The classic.
The classic, the way I get out every time, it's actually an issue, is I got it out the same way in the WNCL final this year. Is I always get caught at point. Chasing a wide one. It's my strength and my weakness.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you put it away when you score so many runs off it, but also keep getting out to it. So I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, right. That's crazy because you're saying that like play freely, play the game, play your style, and then whenever you see it and you light up and it gets you out, that would play the players on your mind
absolutely
a lot.
So it's being smart with it. So it's not it's not entirely black and white that I'm just going to swing at everything wide because that's what I'm good at. It's like, hang on, what's going wrong with the ones that go for runs as opposed to the ones that get caught? Yeah. So what's the difference? And generally it'll almost always be I'm trying to hit it too hard or I've actually chased it as in it's too wide. I should probably just let it go because it's probably either going to be a wide or it's not in my game, and trust that. It's very rare I'll get bowled or LBW.
Yep.
It's just, I don't know, naturally good there. Some players are the opposite. So it's like, we'll actually just wait for the ball to be straight And that element of patience is something I forever need to be working on.
Yeah. So do you have a natural, like a tactic game plan? You go out to the crease and you're like, okay, I'm playing 30 balls, or I'm going to see it in for 5 overs, for example, or do you go off feel like first ball I see it, I'm hitting that straight away?
It's a good question. Probably the biggest thing I'm battling with at the moment. So like half of me wants to go out and literally see ball, hit ball, because that's the simplest way for me, and that's what I find. But that gets me into trouble a lot. So it's every coach pulls their hair out, especially my ringwood coach, about being a bit more patient, giving myself a little bit more time early to get used to the conditions, get the feel, and then go. So I can't answer your question. I should be able to. But generally what I've learned this season is you do have to give yourself time, because you always get different conditions, and you have to give yourself a chance to just settle in and trust that I know I'll score quickly at the back end. So it's that trust element. So half of me wants to go, because that's actually me trying to control an outcome. So it comes back to what we spoke about first. Whereas if you let go and just explore, like just be okay. As a general rule, I'm going to give myself a chance here. So if I get a short ball, I'm going to whack it, because I'm really good at that. But if I get a ball that's fuller, I'm probably just going to be compact. And if I don't score off it because I'm not strong in that area, that's okay to start with. And then trusting that I will make up at the back end.
Also, your changes depending as well on the state of the game, and when you come in, have you lost quick wickets? Are you coming in to stabilise? And then versus coming in, you've got to make runs quickly to get the score or up or anything like that as well. No changes. You have to be kind of adaptable. Yeah.
I'm quite lucky in that I generally open the batting. So it's like it's almost always, so it's good and bad. It's almost always the same situation you're walking into, but also that makes it harder because you don't have the game situation to dictate how to play. So for me, I just think too much. And it's like, well, whereas the odd time I've batted middle order, it's like, okay, this is what does the game need from me? This, I'm going to do it. So it's a lot simpler. But like both have their pros and cons. Like it's just more experience, and the better you get at actually getting it done.
I bet. So before we finish off, I have my Uncle Frank. He gave me he listened to the podcast a while back. Actually, listened over the Easter break. He listened to all, I think about last age at 8. Listened to all 8 within a weekend, and he gave me a whole list of questions to ask future guests that come on. He goes, I want to ask these questions, and most of my family like to have an input of what I do, that sort of stuff. So I've got a question for you. You ready? Uncle Frankie D's question of the day is: tell me about a time that you were most inspired. Or when you were most inspired?
Uncle Frankie D.
Uncle Frankie D.
When I was most inspired? Oh, that's a very good question. I reckon, so it's a bit of a weird one, but back when I was 8 and just moved to Australia and literally never really seen a live cricket game in my life, like besides the old man playing. Went down to the Wacker, and I think it was Australia-Pakistan or Australia-South Africa, I can't remember. And it was the most incredible thing ever. I was like, there's a stadium and there's cricket. And like I said to the family friend that came with us, and it was like, oh, I want to play out there. Can I play out there? And they're like, no, that's where the men play. And I was like, well, that's true. Back then there was no female cricket. Like it wasn't professional enough. It wasn't really existent. I was so inspired by there actually being some cricket, but at the same time it inspired me to be like, well, why can't the girls play? I was a bit of a little cheeky little shit. So I was like, well, why can't the girls play? And then from then it's always been something that I've tracked in different sports, the growth of female sport. And I've always remembered back to that, and like hopefully now the 8-year-old girls now will be able to go to the Wacker and see the Perth Scorchers women play and the Western Fury the women play, and how can we keep making that better? And that's just, I always remember that little moment.
Is that a bit of a source of your kind of competitiveness as well, being like, not being able to play and going out and pushing yourself to go more? Yeah,
it's like if you wanna get me doing something, I reckon you got to tell me I can't do it, and then I'll try.
That's one of the kind of common themes of kind of getting more athletes I kind of talk to, is that desire to one up the person that they've kind of, one up the other person. If they say you can't do it, well, I'll show you type of attitude.
Yeah, so like good coaches know that they'll prod
push the buttons a little
push
bit.
the buttons, and you'll probably get something from me.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
The exploring one is I think I'm going to take that one away from. So anyone takes anything away from this podcast, that's what I'm taking away from it.
That's awesome.
The exploring. I've got one because I have a personal favorite Uncle Frank question.
Oh, yep.
Mine is, if money wasn't an object and nothing was impossible, what would you do?
Gee, that's a big question.
Yeah, loaded.
That's a big question.
Take your time.
I think I reckon I'd be doing what I'm doing now, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, that's always my kind of gauge. It's like, would I be doing what I'm doing? I think I wouldn't be pushing as much in terms of, say, like I go out and talk to schools and doing a lot of that stuff. Probably not as much, but I'd be getting stuck in with athletes. And anyone, when I say athlete, it's anyone that has a desire to improve and a desire to achieve something. I'd love to be working with them, and then I'd definitely be traveling a hell of a lot more and playing more golf.
Playing more golf. They want to get better at golf.
Yeah, I will never play professionally. Not that good, but I do love it. So
we used to have a golf set in here, and then once I started getting a few more guests on, I was like, oh, I better clean this room up. We used to have like an air bike, and then my golf club sitting just there, and I was like, oh, it's time to maybe make this a little bit better looking so people can, not just a room with a microphone and stuff. But is there anything else? I reckon that's all we've got time for.
Happy days. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate your time. It was great. I hope people who were listening got some useful out of their podcast. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, man.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.